What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Diary of a New Producer. This is the weekly series where we give you a look behind the curtains into the life of a new insurance producer. We're calling him Ian Cognito. He is trying to build his book from scratch to however big he wants to make his book. And my name is Micah. I am his mentor. I'm also your host, and this is the Max Revenue Show. Thanks for joining us. This week, what we're going to talk about, three different things: mindset and getting it right. We're going to talk about the ask on cold calls. How do you end the cold call to get to the meeting? And then the last thing we're going to chat about is, what do you do when you're waiting for a decision? Before I get into this week, though, if you missed the previous 17 weeks, go check them out. Every single week, we're talking about something new and different that Ian and I cover, right? So no week is the same. You'll get a ton of value out of every video, whether you start at week 14 or week 1. All right, so let's get into this. Mindset. So Ian and I, we talk every Monday, right? And instead of really having a long talk this Monday, we actually ended up chatting on Friday last week because Ian called. And just to be totally honest, he was feeling discouraged, right? This happens, okay? He's 17, 18 weeks in. Full transparency, he's closed, I think, 2 deals, just over 10,000 in revenue total. And he's feeling down in the dumps, right? No one wants to go 4 or 5 months and sell one thing. And this is one of the hardest things about the insurance industry and becoming a new producer is you can go through long stretches where it feels like you're in a desert, especially when you're not playing the quoting game or you're not really leading with that, right? You're trying to get hired on a broker of record basis, which we talk a lot about. You're just not going to have as many opportunities, even though I would argue that a lot of the quoting opportunities you would get if you're quoting everything and everyone who wants to let you quote are not really legit opportunities, but that's a conversation for another day. So here's what I told Ian though, right? And I said, man, I can sense you're a little bit frustrated or, just kind of disappointed in yourself. I said, don't be, right? Because right now you're 17, 18 weeks in. You've had some good opportunities, you've set some meetings, you're doing the right things, right? And that's the main thing. So here's a couple of things I told him. I said, you can only, first of all, control what you can control, right? You can't control if someone ghosts you. You can't control if people don't call you back. You can't control if people ignore your calls. There's just so much stuff you can't control out there. And you got to get over that, right? Focus on your activity. That's all you can do. And he is putting in the reps. This past week, he made 110 calls. If you know me, my goal is always 200, but it's tough to achieve. That's the one thing I said. Maybe you could he's been probably averaging about 140 to 150. I said, truly try to get to the 200. Make it a focused effort to get to that 200 number. Not because 200 is anything magical, but more so because what that equates to and what that is going to lead to is more conversations. And this is all about conversations. We know you need to have 20 to 25 conversations in order to get the necessary amount of traction that you want to get as a producer. So that's really what you're trying to get to. And I just know from my experience, it's about 200 calls to have 20 to 25 conversations. That's just the way the numbers laid out for me for the last amount of years, over a decade I've been doing this. So unless you got something magic or different about you, that's just what works for me. So anyways, I told Ian, I said, hey man, control what you can control. You're doing a good job. You're putting the effort in. Maybe let's focus on getting your numbers of calls up a little bit more to get a little bit more conversations. Other thing I told him, celebrate your small victories, man. This is why the whole follow-up later list is so critical. I've harped on this before, but celebrate the people who you have a conversation with and just timing is off and they say, call me next month. One of the reasons your first 6 months are so hard or even first year is because all those people who say that you haven't had a chance to follow back up with them yet, right? And we all know that cold calls today equal warm calls tomorrow. A lot of those warm calls is where you set your meetings and you have conversations. So don't get too discouraged because you haven't had that opportunity for those seeds that you planted to start to sprout a little bit. Another thing I told them is you are one deal away from being a freaking rock star, right? From crushing it. And literally, so he has a deal right now he is working on that is, he's waiting on a decision and it's about 100,000 in revenue. So I said, man, here's the crazy thing about this industry. You could, let's say you close this deal in a week. You get the yes, and you don't close anything else the rest of the year. At the end of the year, you're gonna feel like you still had a crappy year, but on paper, you're gonna look like you had an amazing year because you did 110 in revenue your first year. That's awesome, right? Or you could not get it, and then like it could look like you have a terrible year, right? If let's say you close nothing, right, and you have that, and you don't get this big deal. So that's where revenue can be so misleading as a newer producer. I like to focus more on as long as you have a floor set, like number of wins, right, and number of accounts you're bringing on and opportunities, because revenue really can be misleading. I've seen guys get really, really fortunate, not saying lucky, but they land a big monster, let's say early on in their career, year 1 or 2, and then they're gone a year later, right? Because that was the only deal they ever wrote. And everyone thought they were a superstar that year. They were a rising star of their agency. And then they fell off. They went through the doldrums, the desert, and they couldn't recover, and they quit, right? Or that big account leaves. So that's why you need to instill in yourself the habits of prospecting and celebrating the small victories, keeping the right mindset, but also using that as fuel, that mindset. When I told Ian, I said, hey man, you're one deal away and you have one in the works right now for 100K, maybe even bigger. That can make your whole year. But think about this. You are one call away from changing your whole year. If you're down, if let's say you're a producer out there watching this and you're like, man, my year sucks. Get on the phone, go do something, go meet people, have conversations. You never know what could happen, what that next call could lead to. This is a true story I'm gonna share with you. Hopefully it motivates somebody out there. I don't know maybe it was 2016, 17. I was kind of having I had a really good year the year before, and then I think it was my third year, and then I was having kind of like an okay year. I think my revenue was probably around like 75,000, and I was like, man, I don't know what's going on. Last year I wrote like 15 deals and did like almost 200, 150-ish. This year I'm kind of struggling, and it was literally getting down to the last quarter, right? And in this game here, in this industry, I was working out ahead. And so I had my CRM pop up, and there was this account that I called. I thought it was going to be 40 or 50 in revenue. I called him the year before, and all he told me was, hey man, actually I would be open to talking. This year the timing sucks. Let's chat next year. That was it. So the next year pops up in my CRM. I call the guy on his cell phone. He picks up again. He says, yeah, I'd be open to doing some due diligence and chatting this year. And this was in September. Go meet with him. Gives me everything I need. 5 weeks later, it was probably October 20th. I'm doing the presentation. He says, we'll get back to you in a week. This was a 1/1 or a 12/31, but that's important. I get the word on like October 30th. Hey, we want to move forward with you. We're going to hire you guys. This was a $100,000 revenue account, the biggest at that point in my career. And guess what? It was going to hit 12/31 of that year. So my year just went from, because it was a 12/31, my year just went from like a 75, 80,000 year to almost a $200,000 a year, just like that. And so it was kind of a good reminder to me just to remind yourself, like, hey, that next call could be that big account that you just don't know, right? I've seen this happen time and time again, but just stay positive, try to. This is a very mentally grinding profession. The other thing I would say to you is you don't want it to be easy, guys and gals, if you're watching. If this was easy, the pay would suck and you wouldn't even want to be a producer, right? There'd be so many people in the mix, so many producers would be successful that agencies would reduce their commission pay, and you'd be saturated with people in sales and you'd probably be paying you $60,000 a year salary to go sell insurance with maybe a little bonus opportunity. No freedom, no flexibility. So you don't want it to be easy. So just keep that in mind. If you can persevere and keep pushing through and stay in a good spot mentally, there's a lot of good things that can come about with a career as a producer. All right, I think I've beat that horse. Let's talk about the ask on cold calls. Now, this was something that came up because Ian reached out to me last week as well, because I kind of share what's going on in my world. He shares what's going on in his in terms of meeting set, warm leads, and how we're doing. And he was like, dude, you're killing it this week. I had a ton of conversations, had a lot of good traction I'm making. I'm really hitting my March 1st right now and April 1st. Anyways, he said, hey, what's your ask? And I said, dude, I was like, I don't really have an ask, man. I'm like, I just like, you know my script. That's kind of what I do when I get into a conversation, and then just let it happen if they want to meet. I'm not forcing it down people's throats. But I would say this is I've kind of integrated this a little bit, and it's almost like the if you want to determine something, kind of like the pull away effect, I guess, because you could say this is kind of what I've been saying. So, yeah, John, thanks for taking my call. I'm an insurance agent. I know you got an agent you work with. I'm literally not interested in quoting at all, but I was curious and calling to see what you guys do from a due diligence side of things, and didn't know if you might ever be open to having a conversation around that. And if not, that's totally okay too, but just want to call. Yes, that is what I say probably 80% of the time. So the classic sales teachers would probably are rolling over in their grave, right, at this phraseology. But all I can say is that it works. And maybe it's the type of people I'm calling, maybe it's the way I'm saying it, I don't know. But I get into really good conversations, and people don't feel threatened or don't feel like they're being manipulated into anything, because I'm not, right? And that's the second part of this whole, like, the ask thing. It's the mindset. There's a very interesting statistic. I read a book called How to Really Know Somebody. And it said that nowadays, it used to be like everyone was so motivated by like becoming a better person and helping people, all those virtuous things. And now it's all financially driven, right? That's why we go to school, it's all financial. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a capitalist, I believe, great to make money. But we've gone as a society, this is an interesting stat, according to Pew Research, only 7% of people are now motivated by helping others, and 11% find meaning and motivation through learning. So what if you can do those two things really well as a producer? What if you can find and retrain your brain to really to think like, man, who out there needs my help? Who can I help today? Versus, man, I gotta get this appointment. Who can be my next $100,000 deal, right? And I know we just talked about, hey, your next call could be your big one, but what if you flip that to, my next call could be someone who really, really needs a lot of help, and that could be a big one. Might be small, I don't know, but I just gotta find people who need help. It's such a shift, and I noticed myself falling into the trap of just making the calls and being, man, I gotta get my appointment. I'm grinding, and throughout the day, I would just keep reminding myself, okay, before this call, hopefully this person needs some help today. I'm just calling to see if this person needs some help. What that also does is it reduces your cold call reluctance. So anyways, I had that thought. I thought some of you guys might find it helpful. I hope you do. But again, there is no really ask, okay? The ask is what I just told you. So mimic that, follow it, work it into your own, make it your own, and I think you'll have a lot of success. The last thing, and I'll let you run, is what do you do when you're waiting for a decision to be made? So I've told you Ian is waiting for a decision on this, $100,000 plus revenue account. He's like, man, what can I do? And we were kind of talking about different ideas. And it's kind of a fine line, because you don't want to come across as extremely desperate, right? And you don't want it to necessarily all be about who's giving you the biggest cake and the most cookies and the treats. And so you don't want to position yourself as that person necessarily, but every buyer's different, right? If you felt like that is what that buyer really cares about, relationship, local, then play that. But here's a couple things I told him. First of all, here's one thing he just did on his own, which I think is a good little touch. It had been about 7 days since they had the presentation. It was going to be another week or so. And he ordered lunch. He looked up where the guy was Venezuelan, looked up a good lunch spot, sent him some Venezuelan lunch. The guy really appreciated it. The decision maker emails back, hey man, thanks for that, appreciate that. That's a nice touch. Not over the top in my opinion. You could send cookies with a little note, but you just don't want to overkill it, right? So I think something like that is awesome. It's a good way to kind of just show them you're top of mind. And then here's the other thing though I told Ian. So he hasn't met in person with this company. It's about a 3-hour drive away. And I said, man, this is one of those deals where I think it might be worth it. You've already did a presentation. I would have probably tried to do that in person, but since you couldn't or they couldn't, that's fine. But now find a way to get out there and just literally take a day and drive up there. I know it's one whole day, but it's a $100,000 revenue account. And so it's at the finish line. We talked about this in I think week 17 about getting these deals across the line. And so maybe this is where you shoot the CFO a note and say, hey man, we haven't met in person yet. I know you're trying to make a decision. Can I just swing by and just chat with you for 15, 20 minutes, just so you can meet me in person. I just think it might help in making your decision. And anyways, so that's something that I encouraged him to do, and put in the buyer's court. Like, hey, if you think it'd be helpful, I'd love to just stop by if you're open to it, right? See what they say. If they say yeah, then that's awesome. That can go so far, right, and do so much for you and help a deal close. And the other thing I was telling them is, try to add a value piece to it, right? Like, so this particular account has a big auto fleet, and he didn't actually do much digging. Ian didn't on the driving side of it, the trucks, right? And he has a DOT exposure, and I said, hey, maybe we do some digging on the safer side of things and run a report, talk to this consultant, and come back in, and maybe that's a value touch point, right? But that's it, guys. I mean, there's nothing, you can't force people, you can't twist their arms, you don't want to come across as desperate, but I think those little touches can go a long way. So I'm hoping, my fingers crossed and prayers up for Ian that he's going to get this deal, because it'd be a really nice win, not just for him, but for our whole team. So anyways, that's all I got for you. I appreciate if you've stayed with me, you watching, subscribing, click the like button so more people see this, comment below. If you ever have any suggestions for other videos that you want to see me do, I'm happy to chat with y'all and share as much as I can. Go get them.